background's pretty nondescript at the moment. It's quite good, actually.
Yeah. We're live. I can see it. This is awesome.
Yeah. It's live on YouTube. It does say setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. So I don't know whether it's how it swaps between all of this stuff. So
I'm going to have a look on YouTube. Oh, yeah, meeting is now.
So how can we search?
Oh, yeah. Okay, there we are. We are live.
Yeah, I can see it. Here's the link.
Where's the link?
I just watched it in the chat.
Oh, copy streaming link. Yeah.
I'm going to share the link as well to copy.
Wow, look at that.
Wow.
It's definitely like 30
We're live,
seconds
guys.
behind.
We're actually live.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there we are.
Right. I think it's like 20, 30 seconds behind.
Yeah, it is. I've tried that before. We're live on.
Where's the link?
It's in the chat.
Oh, copy streaming. Oh my God. I hate hearing my voice. Oh, I've just said it on live. Wow.
But no one's watching.
Wow. Now thousands of people know.
Oh.
All right. So there we are.
Like 20
turn this volume down, but yeah, there we are. And because what I also like about doing this is that there is a Q&A session on you can all see that. So anyway, look, let's formally start this impromptu YouTube live session. So I'm Ross Monaghan from Deakin Uni. We've got Jamie from QUT. Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
Wow, from Deakin University.
Hi.
Tia from Deakin Uni.
Hello.
And James from Deakin Uni.
Hi, everyone.
And we're missing a couple of people, but we're part of the core team for Student Comms Chat. We've been doing it, almost a month now?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
What have we learned?
It's
where do you begin?
Oh, look, it's a lot easier to get people to get involved than I thought it would be. Like to get a really interesting guests on. You know, people want to learn and people want to talk about themselves.
And how fun actually getting practitioners to join us? Easy, hard?
Oh, it's really easy when you're the only one doing it. So
you guys will be doing it. And just to let everyone know, so just about every practitioner or person that we've approached has actually said yes. And look, if you watch that video I did, that was what it was all about. And I think this came up. And this is why I like these sessions, because we have this discussions about these sort of issues, that how students can go and get a job. And I point out in that, taggy video that I did, that there is this club that students of comms are part of the club, but you probably don't feel like it. And those other club members who are working in the profession are very generous with their time for students, because they used to be students themselves. So most of the time, if you're willing to be flexible about the time that you meet or talk to them, they will give you the time of day.
100%. And also just the fact that we are doing this live stream right now, it just means that the industry is changing, and we need to get the skills that we will use later on in our careers. We need to learn those skills, we need to practice, and this is a fantastic platform to practice with like-minded peers, like-minded friends, and establish connections.
Well, that's a great segue to our upcoming Student Comms Chat, isn't it? With Mel Kettle this Friday.
Bring it on.
Connection. That's what it's that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It is really so important.
100%.
So how do you guys make connections?
Personally, I've made the most through like joining a university society, especially mine's pretty big one. We have a lot of support. it's basically a mix of all business except for like finance, economics, and stuff like that. But that's how I've made a lot of connections, industry connections, as well as like other students and stuff like that. So I'd highly recommend that. And then obviously active on LinkedIn and Twitter recently for me, like the last few months.
Do you think there's value in connecting with other students?
Absolutely. I think there's like just the same amount as like industry professionals, because like students boost each other up. One student might hear something, or like we're all, I don't know, like encourage each other, I guess.
I'm not a huge fan of the term gamified, but that it's sort of what you're doing, isn't it? Because you've got somebody to compete against. Don't you, that's the way I see it. And I think that there is definitely a friendly rivalry. No, it's not so much, not always friendly in business, but I think there is that rivalry between people because we all want to be at least as good as somebody else, don't we? Or if somebody does something, somebody loses weight.
I feel like sometimes you're just inspired by people or peers that is just, just have a good experience and good story. Yeah. So and then we hope to keep up to them. So it's this rivalry here. So I love that.
Yeah, I'd like to call that peer pressure when I'm surrounded by people who are focused and so focused in their pursuit and so talented. I also feel the pressure to be like them. And this happens to me when I'm in the Study Melbourne Ambassador program. Like all around me, all the international students, they're just so gifted and they have super huge networks. They're leaders of student societies. And that's when I feel like I still need to learn so much.
Yeah, learning is so important, and particularly for those of us that want to be or are communications practitioners, the landscape, the communications technology and digital media landscape is changing so rapidly. And not only do we need to keep up with that and use the latest technology, but of course our audiences, our target publics are also changing because of those as well. So, keeping up to date with those is really important, and riding the wave of change, I think, is super important for practitioners. You're all quiet now, but I've got an interesting one. There's always this debate about who are the lucky ones. You guys, because you are so-called the digital natives, or is it old guys like me who have seen the change and and can sort of understand how things might change more rapidly in the future? There's probably going to be some different views on this given that I'm probably about the age of all of you combined. But
Ross. I think everything is still changing. It continues to change, and we're still. The fact that we're digital natives and we've seen, cell phones and smartphones, from almost like since our birth, it doesn't mean that everything stops to change. Everything stops, and it will be like this for the rest of our lives, and in the future. I feel like it's still changing, it's still transforming, and we still need to be able to adjust and learn new skills and find what works best for us, and be able to adapt.
And you don't have to worry about offending the old man in the room.
No.
How do you guys cope with change? Because you've grown up with this, do you think you deal with change better than older generations?
I think it's an advantage compared to the older generations. But yeah, like Yulia said, it's changing so fast right now. So even I cannot keep up. So it's like I cannot keep up with the whole, I don't know, TikTok thing. So I feel like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm too old for it already. So yeah, so it's this is like a slightly advantage, but like you still got to keep up. Like yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the change that I've seen compared to the change that you guys have seen. Some of you have heard this story before. I used a manual freaking typewriter when I was a journalist. A manual typewriter.
That's
So, you can't
Oh my God.
compete with me
Such a
on,
waste of life.
gee.
it's, it had to change the candle every 6 hours because
Oh.
I'm
Wow.
joking about the candle, but that's to make a phone call back then when I was a journalist. I had to pick up a phone and I'd had to call an operator to make what was called a trunk call to anyone outside of the local area. Now, look, that was pretty antiquated even back in the day. But that's, to be able to pick up a phone now and dial, FaceTime, friends on the other side of the world is just phenomenal.
But don't you think it's still a challenge to pick up the phone and speak to someone that you don't know, or pitch something
absolutely.
to someone that you don't know? So the problem is still there. So it's the problem, the essence, the communication issue that we need to overcome. Some of us need to overcome.
Yep.
Like it's still there. So it has not changed, which I find very interesting. So we still have we are in this communication profession. We are members of this communication club. But there is this amazing idea that even though the tools have changed, and how we work has changed in different ways. I know we don't use fax machines, as often as they used to, or we don't send print media releases anymore. Still, you need to be able to write media releases. You need to be able to pitch stories to journalists. You need to think. You need to be able to create strategies, communication strategies, and think broadly and think tactically, and being able to make challenging decisions. So that has not changed. The tools may have changed, but there's critical thinking skills and critical, that the fact that we need to critically analyze any situation, whether it's a crisis or a business as usual type of situation, that has not changed. So we're all in this together. That's what my key message, I guess.
I'd love to edit that out and share that with students, because I totally agree with you. The fundamental skills about strategy. How am I, firstly, who am I communicating with? Secondly, what am I trying to achieve? Thirdly, what are the specifics of my target audience? How am I going to persuade them? And then finally, it's the tactics. Well, what, tactics am I going to use to actually reach them? So it's not really until that later stage that the different technology actually comes in. You could say early on that, target publics have changed a little bit because, their thinking and demographics have changed quite a bit. But that fundamental thinking is still really, really important. And for those of you, look, just while I'm on my high horse here about that, and you would expect me to say this because I'm an academic, but when you get into the workplace, the challenge for students is that those technical skills are the things that employers will initially want you to be able to do. They will want, and there are lots of employers out there who want students to do digital media stuff, which is just churning out videos, photos, and quite just technical, and I would call it low-level comm stuff. But to actually advance in your career and become a manager, those people that can think strategically and think 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the track are those that are going to progress to be senior managers and have a lot more influence.
Yeah, it's such an interesting observation. But from my personal experience, I feel more pressure about the fact that I don't have as much time as, let's say, you had, Ross, to gain those skills, those essential skills, because it's not easy to create a strategy. It's not easy to learn, to think strategically. You need experience to be able to do it. But our generation, we're so used to the new tools that are helping us, and we just need to. We have that pressure of learning very quickly, learning by doing, and so it's from, like, on one hand, yes, it's it hasn't changed, the fact that we need to think strategically, but on the other hand, we now have, let's say, we don't have 10 years to learn this.
Yeah.
We don't have 10 years of experience, future experience of that traditional ladder. Yeah. Now, basically, you need to learn that creative thinking and how you can think strategically and not tactically, which is interesting.
Has globalization changed things, and is the world smaller now? And does that impact on what we do as communicators?
The world is definitely smaller now, 100%. Like the fact that you were saying that you needed to call an operator to call outside of your local area before, and now we can do Zoom chats, Instagram lives, whatever, with whoever in the world at a moment's notice. The world is smaller than ever. It's easier to do PR internationally now than ever with social media and just online advertising. Well, not online advertising, but being able to push your message with global platforms instantly. It's smaller, but at the same time, I guess, like, because you can be very specific in how you push your messages. Although it's gotten smaller, you can actually, I think you can actually make your target publics smaller. You can get really specific in who your target publics are. So I guess not only do I think that, like, the global world is smaller, I think your world has actually gotten smaller.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I might have an interesting perspective.
I think the implications of your work in this day and age will be more far-reaching. So if you have an unethical issue, the whole world can know about it. And the public opinion that you need to care about here does not just pertain to those affected, it also comes from people all around the world. Citizen journalism has been on the rise, and people basically can voice their opinions and make their opinions heard on any virtual platform these days. So the scope of your implications of what you're going to face is going to be much bigger.
Anyone else got thoughts on globalization and shrinking globe? That half of the participants here are
Products of globalization.
Yeah, and Yulia, it's
I'm grateful for the globalization. I remember the very first time I learned this term, globalization. I think it was back in 2011. I was reading about it and I thought, wow, I couldn't even imagine my parents being in a position, like in my position, and experiencing the world the way I experience it. And it's just, I think globalization has changed almost everything. It changed governments, changed economies, it also changed the way we communicate, because we need to consider other cultures. A lot of people work for global companies and global organizations, global not-for-profits, and even if you work for governments, you also need to be able to communicate with other cultures and make sure you understand and make sure that you're you're aware of the of the traditions and what people are used to, particularly as communication professionals. We need to know our publics. So globalization provides us with those opportunities to come together and to come together and solve global problems together. So that's why we do what we do, I believe. And that's, as professional communicators, that's what this is our expertise. That's how I think about it. This is our expertise. We need to be able to communicate with anyone, with any culture, with any nationality, with doesn't matter gender, like religion, doesn't matter. That's what personally inspires me, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, let's finish up, but let's finish up on. I don't want to preempt, but a focus on the future. I mentioned before we started this that I'm feeling pretty confident, and I've been really happily surprised about how society has dealt with social isolation generally. I mean, there have been some horrible, nasty individual incidents, and some countries haven't dealt with it as well as they can. But overall, I'm pretty optimistic. We're going to go through a bit of a downturn, but I think the future is bright, and particularly for communication professionals. So Yuli is a new communication professional. Quiet, James, your students going to be entering the profession soon. What are your thoughts on the future? I'll start with James.
In the immediate, kind of obviously a bit down, but for the future, yeah, no, I'm actually really looking forward to it in terms of I think we were discussing this before, in terms of this, I think it's become much clearer to more people how important and how vital comms is to absolutely every single company out there. It was like the, you remember a couple of years ago, the EU passed some new privacy data protection laws, and so every single website you'd even glanced at for 2 seconds suddenly sent you an email going, "Oh, we're changing," whatever. Yeah. But this year it was here's our response to COVID-19. And it was every single company that you'd ever spent 2 seconds on their online store, or almost bought something, or I accidentally walked into a 7-Eleven once and they sent me 3 emails. But it's vital. It is vital to get that message out there. What are they doing in response? How are they maintaining my safety? How are they maintaining the safety of their workers? And the only way you can do that is through good comms. And this stuff is unpredictable. They couldn't hire beforehand just to make sure they've bulked up this pandemic that's about to happen. I think comms is being noticed as more important than ever.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So how are you feeling about the future, Choir?
I think the competition for internships and for entry positions among communication students will be much harsher in the future. But I think it is also through this pandemic that, like James said, the role of communication is being more widely recognized than ever. And for me personally, through this pandemic, I realized the importance of building an online brand. I actually have some time to have a look, have a review of my personal online brand, as well as reaching to some of my networks and just checking to see how they're doing. It's actually a great time to catch up with your existing networks and let them know you still exist. So I think after this pandemic, communication students can go into the professional world with a newfound respect and attention for online identities and online networking. Yeah.
That's great. And we're going to finish up with Jay-Z or Yulia.
Yeah, Jay-Z, hey. Yo. Look, future, I love everything about future. I used to be very hesitant. I used to be very suspicious and very, I didn't really understand future. And not that I understand the future now, but my perception about the future has changed. I'm now much more excited about the future because I see future as a place where there's so many opportunities out there, and I love to live in the world where we have opportunities, and because it just makes me feel motivated, good about myself, and I think we're living in an exciting and very special moment where we can connect. It's an extremely hyper connected world. We can get in touch with anyone from across the globe. We can connect with them. We can establish those global relationships. But at the same time, I think we also need to remember that sometimes being so hyper connected can also have a different side, which means we're probably less we're at the same time less connected. So there is not probably that depth in how we connect. And so my personal challenge when I think about the future is to have that balance of having global connections and at the same time seeking to understand, their pains and finding solutions that work for many parties, like negotiating that. And comms is absolutely essential to that. Communications is at the heart of global understanding. And in this, particularly in this pandemic and in this crisis, we need to understand each other. We need to be able to speak to each other and work together. So I'm extremely grateful that I'm a communication professional and we are here in this chat. And thank you, Ross, for just making it happen and making us come together and learn and evolve and learn from each other. So it's exciting and very grateful to be a part of it.
Wow, look, thanks you guys. I love doing this. Love thinking about how students can actually supercharge their time at uni and get some amazing jobs and make a real difference in society, because that's what you guys will be doing as communicators, are influencers, both within organizations and within society. So if we see our profession in that way and see ourselves as a force for good, then we do have a bright future, which is fantastic. So thanks everyone. Well, I'm going to finish up now. So we've learned something new today. So I'll talk to you guys soon.